Kakati-Shah. I'm your host for the Uma Show. Welcome to your one-stop journey of feeling empowered. We want you to be bold, be you, be Uma. We are a platform for change. We build confidence. We are your voice. Today, our theme for the show is building community in women's leadership. And I'm so happy to be joined here today by Joya, who is not only the founder of Lady Drinks, but she's an inspirational role model to so many South Asian women around the world. And also, I'm proud to call her a friend. So welcome, Joya. How are you today?
Rita, I think this is the first that I've seen you during the pandemic. So it's wonderful to see you, my friend.
Absolutely. It's so nice to actually be connected. So tell us about where you were born, how you grew up.
So I am American born. My parents immigrated to central Pennsylvania, which at the time when they immigrated in 1969 was home to maybe a few hundred Indian families. Today, the central Pennsylvania corridor has about 4,000 Indian families that live there. But as many immigrants go, as you know, they found comfort, they found community in moving to this small part of Pennsylvania. And so in 1969, that's when they moved there. I was born there. My family dynamic is such, and this is something that I do a lot of public speaking about, is that I was born into a home of a lot of domestic violence. So I knew from a very young age that two things were going to happen. One is that I was going to leave my home as soon as I was able and not meaningfully return. And the second thing is that I wanted to become a television anchor. Watching the news every night at 6:30 was a family ritual. It was something that happened by clockwork. And I think for my father, it was him being patently American. And for me, it was patently going to be my future. So I left at 18 and I paid for college and I paid for grad school and I paid for every move around the country to come to New York. And New York City has been my home for the last 24 years.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Joya. And speaking of that, you've had an extremely successful and varied career, as you've mentioned, ranging from journalism, I think even film production as well, a brief stint in finance and entrepreneurship. So walk us through your journey a little bit and tell us what led to your career choices.
Like I said, I just knew from a very young age that writing was going to be a part of my career. For me, even today, I write everything I say, and it was writing for me was like oxygen. So there was no question that I was going to become a journalist. The fact that I became a business journalist really fit with my personality. You know me pretty well. I don't deal with a lot of bullshit. My bullshit meter doesn't go very high. And I love that business news is very much black and white. The markets were either up or down. Gold was either up or down. But if you wanted to send me off to cover a fire, or you wanted to cover somebody's cat who had crawled up in a tree, I'm not necessarily your girl. So business news and the math and science that went into explaining why business news was important really spoke to me. And that's what I've done for the last 20 years. I've been on the stock exchange floor doing hourly updates, analyzing the markets. Now, about halfway through my career, I realized that I was doing this grind where I was up at 2:30 in the morning, into work by 3:30, on the air by 5 o'clock. And I felt that I didn't really have a body of work that I could look at and say that I was proud of. So in 2010, I started a production company on the side with a view to make longer format documentaries that I could take the time to make beautiful and revise. So that was a side production that I started while I was still on television. And that ultimately is what led to the avatar that I embody today. Because while I went in with the intention of building this production company, my business partner had started something very small in Toronto called Lady Drinks. And Lady Drinks was a monthly meetup for women in film and TV so they could network and find jobs.
Excellent. And we're just going to come back to Lady Drinks actually, because I have a ton of questions on that for you.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, and you've spoken about challenges in your life, it's often said that behind every success story is an underlying event or experience that actually leads us to making these choices. And you've spoken about domestic violence. You've spoken openly about the way you grew up, your parents, and that infrastructure you had. Can you share an example from your life where you actually managed to turn around a situation and you picked yourself up again?
Yeah, I think that as women, it is so important for us to have stewardship over our own finances. And whether I liked it or not, I got that lesson very early in college. Like I said, I left at 18 and I realized that my parents didn't have the emotional bandwidth. And the sophomore year of college, I realized that they didn't have the financial bandwidth to pay for college. So I was enrolled in a very expensive school, not one that was of my choice. I had given up scholarships at lesser schools, but they were substantial scholarships that would have gotten me through. But my parents were like, we got this, we're going to pay for this. And to make a long story short, second semester, sophomore year, I went to registrar for my classes, and the registrar said to me that nobody's paid last semester and nobody's paid for this semester, go home. And the one thing that I knew is that I already had this forward momentum. And the one thing that I was not going to do was go back home.
Yeah.
So I remember marching into the office of the CFO, the chief financial officer of the university, and sitting down, my little 18 or 19-year-old self, and telling him that my parents were no longer in the picture and that I needed to figure out, with his help, how I was going to finance at that time about $21,000 a year in tuition.
And that must have been an incredible experience, especially as somebody who is for the first time standing on your own 2 feet. And that really, I think, shaped up a lot of your future.
I sat there with that CFO and we dickered back and forth until I ended up ultimately getting a scholarship for financing half of my education. And then the other half was financed through us jerry-rigging a series of loans together. So that was a situation that could have gone very, very awry, but I led the charge and I made sure that it went my way so that I could get through college and ultimately get through grad school.
So now coming on to mentorship, it's often a word we hear a lot, especially in business. And we often hear that mentors really help shape and guide us in our future decisions. Is there somebody that you can think of that was a positive influence in your life and that guided you through your career choices?
Sure. In terms of mentors, my first mentor that I can remember was at Bloomberg. And that was my first job where I had been brought in as an understudy with the understanding that in 7 months I was going to become an on-air reporter. But I really needed to get under my belt the language that goes with delivering financial news. And so every day at the end of the night, after the anchor had finished her shift, I had to get up into the anchor chair and deliver a report, demonstrating that I had the acumen, I had the language at my fingertips. And then management changed. And so the original manager that brought me in with the 7-month plan was gone. She had gone off to London. And the new management was like, well, we don't know about your trajectory anymore, but you stay as a producer. And I had a tape editor. His name was JB. And him and I had gotten to be great friends because he was somebody I talked to every day. And he realized that I wasn't getting up and making these tapes at the end of my shift anymore. And he was like, Joya, what's going on? And I was like, JB, I just don't think this is going to happen for me, not with the new management change. And he was like, Joya, I want you to get in that chair and I want you to tape a report. And the next day he was like, Joya, get in that chair and tape a report, tape a report, tape a report. And then finally, when I had enough reports knitted together, he took me to a friend of his here in Brooklyn and we made my first reel. And that reel got me on CNN after I got an agent. So for me, I will always look back at him because he picked me up, he scooped me up at a time when I could have gone one way or the other. And he saw something in me, he championed my cause, and he got me through that hump.
That's an incredible story. And also it shows what resilience you had and have followed in the footsteps that your mentors have presented for you. So now moving on to resilience and success stories, let's talk about Lady Drinks. So Lady Drinks, if I understand correctly, started off as a networking platform many years ago, initially for South Asian women, but it's pivoted into so much more. And I've had the personal pleasure of attending many of your events, have enjoyed them very much. And for me, certainly, not just having that professional network and meeting professional connections, but meeting new friends as well. It's meant a lot. Can you tell us about the journey of Lady Drinks and just the evolution that you've had with Lady Drinks?
So Lady Drinks started as a side product or as a side benefit of my starting that production company back in 2010. My partner was English and she had started Lady Drinks in Toronto. And when she and I formed our company here, our production company here in New York, we went to City Hall to register it. She said, hey, Joya, can we start hosting Lady Drinks events here in New York City? And when we started hosting the first events, what I didn't realize and didn't expect is there were some 300 Indian women showing up in those first 2 years of my hosting Lady Drinks events. I didn't realize that I'd very unapologetically been telling my story and had been hiding behind the screen of the television for, at that point, 10 years. And it was the first time that I came out from behind the TV screen and was made accessible. And I didn't realize that a whole generation of Indian girls had grown up watching me on TV at a time that no Indian girls were on mainstream American television. And they were all coming to share now that they were doing something other than doctor, lawyer, engineer. So for me, I was like, okay, clearly I'm in a place of responsibility, whether I like it or not. Who have I spent my, 10 years at this point interviewing? It's been titans of business, Fortune 500 CEOs, and thought leaders. What if I took that dynamic out from behind the TV screen, moved it in front of a live audience, and started to create teaching moments?
Right.
I would already curate the room, and the room was already attuned to each other's cultural hurdles. But how could you start to cherry pick from the people in the room who are going to become your support systems?
Right.
Because as I was sharing, my journey to getting here was a singular one. And if I hadn't installed other people like JB and other strong people who believed in me and believed in my dream as my support systems, I wouldn't have gotten here. And I wanted to build that for other women, and I wanted to get them there faster.
And that's actually a really great story, because I, as an entrepreneur myself, I can tell you that having a support system is so very important. Can you tell us as well, why do you think it is really important, especially for South Asian women like ourselves, to have that support system?
Because we don't know how to ask for help. We don't know how to raise our hand and show vulnerability. As a culture told, well, you should just know the answers. Well, we don't know all the answers. And sometimes success means that we have to collaborate, we have to reach out, we have to ask for help. And if I'm creating a safe environment where everybody already knows each other and they have their own set of resources they're bringing to the table, then you might feel more comfortable asking those questions. Not to mention that every week I'm bringing in 3 speakers that are at a level of success that not only do you get to listen to in conversation with me, but you have direct access to them because I fashion programming so that you get to ask them questions. So I'm hoping that one way or another, you're getting the ingredients of what you need for success.
Absolutely. And you're presenting role models as well. Quite often in the South Asian community, we don't have those role models. We don't see the people to look up to that look like us. And having a platform like Lady Drinks helps you do that. So I think that's so important as well. So now you're running your own business, you're an entrepreneur, and running your business is tough at the best of times, let alone when there's a pandemic, you're in quarantine, you're in lockdown. How have you managed to deal with all of this? And have you had to pivot during this time?
So I think that anybody at the end of the day has to really look at what they're in the business of. I am in the connections business. Whether I do that at a live event, or whether that I do it via Zoom call, or whether I do that in email, the fundamental end result is the same. Yeah. And so for me, I just took all of my programming, because I work 6 to 8 months out. All my speakers are already confirmed. I just pivoted the entire roster of programming to virtual. And then I created these mastermind calls where everybody in the membership is broken down by industry, and they have set times that they meet every single week. And by virtue of doing that, this membership that I've been building has become closer to each other. And I'm not necessarily always the intermediary that has to make the connections. And that's what I always hoped for. And that's already happening. So for me, I've actually added members throughout the pandemic because people are hungry for this. And where are they going to go? There's nowhere to go. And I really love that people have started to form their own connections because they're coming together every single week now. Whereas at an event, you might come together once a month, maybe once every other month, but you may not see the same people consistently.
And that's actually a really good point. Absolutely. So now pivoting from your professional life to your personal life, when you're not working, if you're not working, what do you like to do?
I am somebody who loves to travel, and we all know that that has gone by the wayside. I'm usually on a plane at least every quarter.
And we've traveled together as well a couple of times too, so I can vouch for that.
So I'm suffering a little bit from not being able to do that. I'm a huge fan of great food and great wine. I'm lucky that I'm with a man who loves to cook. So we've been spending a lot of time doing that. I'm also with a man who loves his drink. So we've been exploring a lot of different wines. And we've been exploring our new neighborhood. We just moved after 20 plus years in New York City to Brooklyn. And so we're really enjoying creating little mini adventures each day for ourselves. We're going to a new neighborhood and going to new restaurants and making that kind of part of our adventure right now, because we're very limited in what we can do. We were supposed to get on a plane and go to Wisconsin, which is where his parents live. And that's now off the table because anybody returning from Wisconsin to New York State is forced to quarantine for 14 days. So we're really kind of making fun where we can find it.
And I think that's the positive part about this, that, you take a situation, and one thing I've known about you, Joy, and admire so much is that no matter what situation it is, you just turn it around. You just flip it around. You just bring it on, whatever it is. It rains, you turn it into sunshine. Even now, it's pretty miserable at times, being stuck indoors, but you're turning it into something positive. You're making something of it. That is inspirational. So final words from you. For any budding journalists, entrepreneurs, or just young women out there, what would you say to them?
I think one of the common questions that I get today, and I even got it like a couple weeks ago, is how can I get on TV? I want to do what you've done. And for me, from when I entered the television industry in 1997, it's changed drastically. You have all the tools that you need at a consumer level, a camera, a microphone, editing tools. If you can develop a niche, what is it that you're talented in? And you talk about that every single day, and you develop your own following, because it's not a bunch of people sitting in an ivory tower now that decide or ordain you worthy of being on television. You can actually build a following yourself. The consumer gets to decide. Then the media will come and find you. So I feel like, the whole dynamic of getting on TV has flipped on its head. But you, on the other hand, have to put in the work. You've got to put in the consistency, and you've got to be able to show up each day, and your tribe will find you.
Absolutely. And very, very famous last words. Speaking of microphone, that's exactly what that structure is in front of you, isn't it? Yes.
My podcasting mic.
Absolutely love it. Yes. So thank you so much, Joya. That is actually all we have time for today. So I want to thank you so much, our guest, Joya Das, and you, our viewers, for watching and joining us on this empowerment journey. If you'd like to stay in touch with us, please follow us on our social media and Twitter handle, which is at BeBoldBeUma. We want you to embrace that inner goddess of go-getting. We want you to be bold, be you, be Uma.